Welcome back to the Channel Supply House. Today we're going to be doing a flake floor. And if anybody knows me, I've always hated flake floors, but I have been getting into these MICA flake floors, and they are beautiful, just so different than the cheap vinyl flake you've seen done for years now. So stay tuned. I think this is going to turn out way cooler than you think. You're going to get some really, really cool depth. We're going to be going over fractures. We're going to be filling expansion joints, sealing the slab. Right now we have the crew grinding off a few of the highs and just trying to level and open up the pores on the slab. And here soon we're going to be priming everything and filling all our fractures and whatnot. So I hope you stay tuned. It's going to be kind of fun. Do I have to grind my slab? What if the concrete is new or in really good condition? Why would I have to grind it before I epoxy it? Well, you get a lot of benefits. If you have any little high spots, your grinder's gonna immediately find those, especially if you're good at grinding a floor. Grinding your slab can get better penetration of your initial coat of epoxy, so you're never gonna get hot tire pickup or anything. You take care of all those little low spots. We're really looking for uneven spots, and while the whole class thought this was a really smooth slab, as soon as we ran just an 18-inch head, which isn't that big, over the top, you're starting to see a lot of low troweled areas on the floor. And you're also hitting some gummy stuff on the floor that looked like nice and gray like concrete. So really, until you grind, you don't always know what you have. So I would recommend renting a inexpensive floor grinder, like an 18-inch head or something like that. Make sure you're not using too aggressive of tooling or anything like that, but make a good steady pass on your floor. And remember, this comes down to how smooth and how even. So just make some really smooth, even passes over your floor. Get as close to your edges as possible without diving in. Don't overwork one little area. You want to work your whole entire floor. If you have an area that's, say, problematic or rough, start working that whole section of the floor like at diagonals to each other. You know, run a 45 and 90 and slowly cut that area of the floor until it gets even with whatever's around it. But this is really fun, so just hang on and watch. You're gonna watch a lot of people today practicing running the floor grinder. And what we're really trying to do is get them better at running consistent speed. A lot of this is a very easy to operate floor grinder, but it kind of pulls and then it kind of pushes on you. And you're just trying to kind of get a steady speed of that machine going, and then get a steady set, like if you're biting off another third of that 18-inch head every time, and just make sure you're overlapping each pass really nicely and not letting the machine control you, but you control it. So it's kind of fun to watch. It's kind of frustrating sometimes, but I remember how frustrated I was and how stupid I was the first time I ground the floor. So come out to a class and get some hands-on experience with us on an actual job. This is just a crack chaser. This is a regular 4.5-inch grinder. I just set a weird, kind of a cheesy ass dust shroud on it for vertical cutting more, so we can chase. If you notice, this is kind of a wide blade. It's supposed to be kind of pointy. And the goal is wherever I thought there was a fracture over here. Maybe I was wrong. I know there's some over on the other side. Yeah, like this fracture here. If we were to go ahead and just epoxy over the top, for starters, air would come out. So then we could fill this with a slurry, but if you just pack a slurry in there with our epoxy, it's not as likely to really bond into the sides and deal with any issues that caused the fracture in the first place. And if it does move, it's more likely to crack back out there. So we're gonna do two things. We're gonna open this up and create a channel, and then we're gonna prime it with a really thin viscosity epoxy that we make with acetone in it, that we're gonna soak into both sides of this. And then we're gonna put a flexible epoxy over the top, and it has room, if it keeps moving, to actually expand and contract, because now instead of a fracture that's like, you know, a 80th or 60th of an inch wide, we're gonna have a really good, you know, 1/4 inch or wider, you know, almost a 1/2 inch, you know, wide channel in there that'll give us lots of room to move in there without ever broadcasting it out into our floor. So This is a Festool. It's a pretty good HEPA vac system. Your limitation on this is your guard. So we'll be a little dusty in here, but not bad. Well, here's my crack chasing wheel that I usually use. Ghetto, yes, but efficient and effective, yes. Has a vertical dust cutting shroud. If you notice, these crack chasing wheels are wide, thick wheels. It's just made to go down in that crack and open it up. We usually hook this up to the Festool, which pulls a ton of air through that. I'll usually run another thing of foil on here. But today I got my grinder out here. I have my fancy little like painter's pole I stuck it on so I don't have to bend over, because I know I don't like to bend over if I don't have to. I took and just hose clamped it to it. Works amazing for just standing up and using a crack chaser. Hook this up to your Festool, it extracts, but showed up today, there's no button. So we're gonna show you, if you're even more ghetto than this, how do we get it done? There's always a way, and here we'll just show you a simple way. We have a cheap grinder, throw the same wheel on it, chase it with a vacuum. It's not optimal, but it'll get us through today. So here we go. We'll get as much of this out of there as we can. If it doesn't cut out, we'll try grinding it, but I hate grinding it because it's so much more likely that I just don't want to mess this up at all, but that's quite a gap. So if anybody wants to work on that, we'll get our transition built here. Just because we're getting to the ends, it's very easy to start moving way too fast just because we're kind of getting up to our wall. So make sure you're really wanting to make sure you're only going as fast as that diamond wheel can cut the floor. So really nice and steady. I see people speed up and slow down, and you're trying to keep a very even as it passes, and you also even want to bite off the same amount of overlap every single time as well. So, and then if you notice, we ran it one direction, and now we're running it at 90 from that. So we'll get a lot more level floor and hit a lot of our little low spots easier. So. This is our new Polyaspartic 1-to-1 mix ratio.
This is just epoxy right now?
This is a Polyaspartic. It's super flexible, so if this joint moves in the future, it'll really expand and contract and allow that joint to move. It also will still cure if there's moisture stuck in the fracture, which is a really uncommon thing for most products. Is this is not as moisture doesn't have as much. It'll still cure on it. Now, if we want to penetrate water, I'm going to put just a splash. I'm guessing at this, by the way. I'm pretty accurate, pretty educated. Right there. That was about 15%. I mean, I was measuring, but I could have a more accurate pour. You can go 15 to 20% with acetone in here. Always remember, mix your A and your B first. if that makes sense, because you want accurate A and B measurement for the chemical reaction. My goal here is to just prime this. Now, if there was any moisture, the acetone in this would actually help it cut directly into that moisture. And then we're going to fill it with a slurry that's going to bond to this chemically. And then you're not just filling the fracture, you're actually gluing it back together, if that makes sense. So first I want to just bind these fractures together in the bottom as much as possible so that, because really the fill is a little more topical, and I want, if there was any moisture in there, to be able to penetrate into both sides of that fracture to actually glue them together. And that's what this is doing. More so, a lot of times you'll dry a slurry out so much that it stays on top really nicely, but it's not really soaking down into that joint or anything like that. So, man, I hate colds, guys. I'm sorry, I sound like a... Really. Come on, Levy, I need to have somebody else show me how to do this. Sometimes a ketchup bottle, I should have picked up some of those at Sam's Club, Costco's. Those work really well. I'll dump this in a ketchup bottle and just pour it right along here. Now, a lot of times for a small fracture, just like this is adequate and we won't have to go back over it with a slurry. If it keeps seeping in, we will dump a little slurry into that area. Something we can, that'll stack up, because the slurry will stay on top. Over there in all our expansion joints, we know that would seep through. So we're gonna do a slurry in all of those. Little fracture there. And don't try to fill it. If it's seeping through, just keep moving. We'll come back with a slurry. There we are, finally. Able to pour slightly more accurately. Is if I have a failed coating, like some garage floor paint on the floor, and I see it flaking off, I know that if there's moisture or something that's causing that failure, it's probably trapped underneath right now. And it'll look real dry where it's flaked off, because cement's really good at like evaporating right here and having tons of surface moisture underneath there. And you do a surface test and it's testing for continuity, so you end up not getting really a true moisture reading in your slab. So I'm not a huge fan of moisture meters. I'm more of a fan of treating it as if there is moisture, making sure if there's a failed coating, get it off. Then that's going to let, during all your prep, it's letting that floor dry and breathe. Then grind out all your fractures, open them up, fill them all with a little bit of an acetone cut, not xylene, not ketones, acetone, because acetone is a water-soluble product in a really pure polyaspartic. It makes this somewhat water-soluble. So, and then it'll cure with that moisture or without it, and it'll really hold the moisture out through the bottom of the fracture a lot better than if you hadn't mixed. Otherwise, it'll hit that water and it might cure on it, but it's not going to try to soak into it and bond through it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So the acetone is kind of what we need to help us carry through the water and cure. We are doing a slurry to fill our fractures. All the larger fractures, we'll mix a little bit of our concrete powder that came right out of our vac bag that we already ground off the floor. And the color match isn't really an important thing, but it is kind of cool that it sets up on top better and color matches nicely. I want it just flowable, pourable, but something that's we're really wanting it to set up and stop flowing into, and just be thick enough like peanut butter that it kind of sets on top. If Somebody wants to take these putty knives and just kind of make sure, just immediately right behind them, just kind of putty knife it in. Make sure it's just a little high on the joint. If there's a void, take some excess and scrape it up on top. Right here, we just use some foil tape to tape our expansion joint on the side that we are not going to be coating with epoxy. Epoxy and urethanes don't stick to this at all, so we'll be able to cut this off, and we can overfill this today, and then cut it wherever we need to, peel this tape off, grind everything perfectly flat, and it's good. As far as this, we stuck a little piece down just because our coating is not completely cured, so we can close our garage door into it tonight. So.
And I use this a lot of times on like raised decks on the side of people's houses.
You know what? Let me go behind that. See how we're kind of crooked?
Yeah.
On there, yeah, let me. And this is usually how a little roller and a